Hey everyone, my guest today likes to think of AI as an Iron Man suit for the mind. It's something you put on, that you fuse with, and that can take you to greater heights. It can also make you incredibly dizzy and be very dangerous if you, the human, don't stay in control of it. Rajiv Pant is building synthesis engineering, a method for human-AI collaboration that helps builders go faster while not falling into the trap of letting AI do the things that we humans ought to own. Things like the architecture, the judgment, the thinking, and the learning. Rajiv is the former CTO of the New York Times. That's where he and I first met way back when I was a product manager there. And today he's the president of Flatiron Software. On today's show, Rajiv will explain how synthesis engineering is a kind of middle ground between vibe coding and agentic engineering. Plus, Rajiv has open sourced all of his synthesis methodologies, and we get into why open source AI is so important if we're going to trust AI to help us make big decisions. Would Tony Stark have trusted his suit if he didn't know how it was built or who owned it? Welcome to Future Round and Find Out. I'm Dan Blumberg. Here we celebrate the breakthroughs called BS on the Hype and explore how things may go sideways and how we can build a better future together. Sign up for the newsletter at futurearound.com.
So the human being sets the architectural direction, maintains an active understanding of the system, holds the system to the same standards as if it was done by people, and makes sure the system is self-learning and self-improving, and then the knowledge can be transferred. So in this Iron Man suit for the mind kind of example, what happens is that the person is at the center of this collaboration, which is contrasted from, say, vibe coding, where you hear about, people have a great idea and they ask the system to just do it for them, or agentic coding, which is aiming towards just completely automating certain things and tasks. And I think that maybe there's someday in the future, there will be a day when machines can just autonomously do all kinds of tasks. But certainly, I think in the foreseeable future, at least in the next year or two, the human judgment needs to be central to all of this. And humans need to be in charge of the work that's being done.
Before we dig too much into what synthesis engineering is, what's the problem that you're trying to solve, either on the vibe coding end of the spectrum or on the agentic engineering side?
What I'm trying to solve, say on the vibe coding end, is that people develop a solution very quickly because anyone who has an idea can go into a vibe coding platform and say, hey, build me this. But they're often not thinking about, is this the right thing to build? Does it actually add value? Is this maintainable? And if tokens got expensive or I didn't have access to this AI platform, would this system still work? And do they actually have an understanding of the system so that they can continue to make it more useful for their users? So let's say you create some software, right, using vibe coding, and on day one, it seems to add value for you. You sell it to a few customers even, and they start paying you for it. But then soon you run into this problem of, okay, they're asking for improvements, but if you didn't understand how the system was actually built, if you didn't set that direction, then you just tell AI, and because AI doesn't, by default, the way these vibe coding systems are set up, they don't maintain your long-term vision for this product and what they learned before in building this. They will just go from one end to the other, and you'll keep adding features. And after some time, the software becomes very hard to maintain, and it's not as useful and as valuable anymore. I think vibe coding definitely has its place. It's great for prototyping. It's great for building something that need not be enterprise grade or for a short-term solution. So what I work on with this synthesis coding is meant to be complementary to that. So, okay, you can prototype and test an idea with vibe coding, but then when you want to make production grade software, you would use synthesis coding, which is a part of the synthesis engineering family of crafts. And the difference with agentic coding is that with agentic coding, people give up their agency to the coding agent. They'll just say, okay, this is, say, for example, with spec-driven development, or they'll just define a goal, and the software will go on and keep building this software for them, or the agentic coding software will go and build this for them. But the person at times does not have a deep understanding of how it was built, what decisions were made, what trade-offs were made. They have just given all their architectural decisions and agency and the thinking over to an AI, and that also has long-term consequences.
I'd love if you could crystallize this, make this a little bit more real for me. So if I sit down and I have a product that I want to build,
Yeah.
what is it that I'm doing differently with these principles in mind, or how does it feel different, with hands on keyboard versus the other
Sure,
two
that's a great question.
polls?
What this process does is that hands-on is that there are reference implementations, so there are skills one can install. So for example, before you check in your code, there's a code review skill here that goes through, which is distributed as a part of the open source package with synthesis coding. So that code review skill will very systematically review all the code you've written, and you can, by the way, also improve that skill itself. And yes, somebody could do this in vibe coding. Once the code is written, say, review this code for me. But any LLM could interpret that in multiple different ways, right? What does it mean? Review this code. Is it good quality or bad quality? But what this skill has, it has a collection of rules built in for reliability, for being future proof, for cybersecurity. So what this reference implementation of this set of skills does is that when you're doing this kind of coding, it will systematically maintain a lot of these checklists for you and help you with that work.
What does slop look like from a code perspective?
So sometimes code generated by AI, for example, a test that is testing a piece of functionality, might not be actually testing the way an intelligent human who wrote a testing module would do. It's just testing it to make sure it passes the test, for example. That would be, so
Right.
it would look like that you have test coverage for the code you've written, but all this test is doing is just like rubber stamping it, and it runs and it looks like it's done something substantial. And by the way, in other cases, there's other kinds of slop that the AI creates. It will tell you, oh yes, I've done this, but it'll actually put a placeholder or a stub function in there that actually doesn't do anything, but it looks like it's created. Then there's other slop where the AI has not thought through what the software could be used for in the future, or how it relates to the real world and what could be improved in it. So it may create a solution that literally solves a problem right here. So I'll give you an example. When I was familiar with the work of somebody who was building a software to help do performance reviews and review people's code. And this person gave the AI a sample of what a report would look like and said they told the AI to go build this. And when the QA testing was done on that, they found that, well, it was giving the exact same performance report to every employee because the AI just followed their instructions to the dot. And one of the challenges is that because these LLMs are non-deterministic, you could give it the same prompt and once get really high quality code that actually does what it's supposed to do, and the other one that pretends to do and literally has done what you asked it to do but doesn't understand your intent. So that is often a problem with AI generated code, that it might literally do what you've asked the code to do, but no human would write it that way, because a human would understand the purpose and your intention behind it and would foresee certain future use cases. And by the way, synthesis coding helps you avoid all this because a lot of these skills have specific rules built into them that say things like, hey, instead of just building what I've asked you to build, use this thinking framework. Use this framework to understand, ask me questions if something is not clear. One way to think of it is also think of a vibe coder who has made a lot of mistakes and over time has learned and codified all the best practices they could think of and put them in software form in the form of agent skills. And that's what synthesis coding skills are.
As you're using AI more and more as a software engineer, like how is it changing the job? Is it making it more fun as you become more of an orchestrator and less of a craftsman who's writing code? I'm curious how it actually just changes the day-to-day enjoyment of the job.
So I will say, software engineering and product engineering, building things, whether it's building software or building even, physical objects, has often been fun for a lot of people. It's a source of joy, of enjoyment. One way to think about how it's changing is when software engineers go from being a hands-on individual contributor to a team lead and a software engineering manager. So this question has existed for a long time in the past. When I talked with many software engineer colleagues, they really enjoyed writing the code and not having to deal with management issues.
Politics.
Yeah. And all those, politics, management, all those things. Now, working with AI, when you go to the role of an orchestrator or architect, you can still have a lot of enjoyment from building something, but you're not dealing with people politics. So you can truly enjoy your craft as a builder, as a maker, and continue to enjoy it even when you quote unquote manage a team of AI agents. Because this team of AI agents, aren't people; they are just automations within the system. So I feel that particularly when people are using synthesis coding, the work remains as enjoyable and as meaningful as ever. And you're still solving problems. You may be writing less code in the particular programming language, but that has evolved over time anyway,
Right.
because people wrote machine code, they wrote system level languages, then moved to higher level languages. And with synthesis coding, you are still in a way writing code, but just at a more abstract level. You're making decisions about what should be deterministic, what should not be, where the system should use an LLM to do something, where should the system help you write code that runs in a very deterministic way and meets those goals. So all the excitement of building products and solving problems still remains. And that is always exciting for people who are problem solvers or who like to build solutions for others.
I know you use AI as a thinking partner, and you have particular methods of ways that you do that. Can you share a bit more of how you found it to be effective and what patterns work or what doesn't work right
Sure.
now?
Yeah, so the thinking partner part is interesting because what happens is at times, depending on how much sleep we've had the last night and what our mood is like, our cognitive abilities are at a different scale each day and every hour of the day. So what I've done is also built a thinking framework skill where if I am looking to solve a difficult problem, it could be in any domain, it could be in personal life, it could be for coming up with a product strategy, it could be for writing software, it could be for helping me plan a blog post I'm writing, or any problem that I face in life. If I had unlimited time and resources and people to help me solve this problem, how would I solve it? So I would use multiple modes of thinking. I would start with first principles, I would end with design thinking, and in the middle, I would think using analogies, I would use systems thinking. But obviously, many times when we want to make a quick decision on something, I have maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I don't have the time and energy and resources to think it through this systematically. So what I've done is built this framework. This framework has 5 different modes in it, and that is also open sourced. And I have used it for all kinds of things. Like, for example, if it's helping me build software and there is a point at which it needs to make a certain decision about whether is this the better architecture or should I go with this database versus another one, it applies all these thinking modes. And then, by the way, the final decision always lies with me, but it'll explain all the pros and cons. One concrete example of this could be where if you're building a product, you can build it quicker if you make certain compromises
Yeah.
and get to market faster. And in some other cases, a better choice may be to build the software that more robust and more secure and so on. It's a issue that startups and big companies all deal with all the time. And this thinking framework will help me brainstorm and figure out the pros and cons of if I went for the quick and dirty solution, then you get quick and dirty. Or on the other hand, if you go for the long term solution, well, you may be too late to the market. So it'll help me understand those things and make a decision. It could also be about if I've been invited to two different events, which one do I want to go for? So I give all the context to the AI and it helps me think through. But what's key in this is that just like with all the synthesis coding and synthesis engineering frameworks, I'm not outsourcing my thinking to the AI. The partner part is important. I think a lot of times when people read, say, Anthropic's advertising and saying, use it as your thinking partner, they're just asking the AI, what should I do? That is fundamentally different from what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm telling the AI specifically this that, okay, here are the choices I have. Here's the context I have. Here is what I'm thinking so far about the pros and cons. And here is a complete checklist of 5 thinking modes and a whole thinking framework that I'm asking you to use. So start with first principles, then look at how this whole problem should be solved. So then it can help me. Sometimes if I'm writing a blog post, I will give that to the AI and say, help me figure out how I should write this. So the AI will use first principles and say, okay, who is this for? who is the audience. Maybe you should split this into two different posts, because one would be more relevant to CEOs, one would be more relevant to, say, journalists, one would be more relevant to programmers. So maybe it's three different blog posts, or maybe here are the pros and cons of writing one that is accessible by everyone, and here are the pros and cons of writing three different ones. So all these decisions, the thinking framework can help with.
And how do you, if people who are listening have not created their own frameworks like this, like what's, practically speaking, like what's a way that people can get started to have not just the out of the box Claude, ChatGPT, whatever, like what are some of the best practices for how to get started with creating a partner like this?
This is actually something where the AI chatbots and agents can be a huge help, because I had built a console, and basically what this console does is that every morning it'll check my messages across Slack, email, Google Chat, and various other places, and give me an update and help me plan my day. And it'll say, these are the things I need to know, these are the things I need to do, these are the action items and deliverables, just the way, say, a CEO in some company may have had a really good executive assistant and a chief of staff and a team that would have outlined and planned their day for them. Yeah. So I built this console that I've also given away on the Synthesis Coding website. It's open source. And I mentioned this to a colleague who is not a programmer. And she not only got this console running on her computer, but she got it running and looking better than the one that I had built. She built an improved version of this. And I was quite impressed, because I was wondering, wait, but you're not a programmer, and you haven't dealt with like GitHub and open source and all this stuff. And what she did was she basically went to Claude and said, this is a software that my colleague has made and it's open source. Download it, get it, and then make all these changes to make it better. And I saw the screenshots. It was a much better version of what I had created that non-programmer developed. So what they can do with things like this also is, like, for example, they could point it towards the Synthesis Coding and Engineering site and say, hey, these are all the skills and best practices that are published. How can I incorporate them into my workflow? And they could then brainstorm with the AI. The AI could download all my open source software to their computer, check it for security, test it, and so on, and adapt it for their needs. So as long as the human operator uses the AI agent intelligently and knows what is the desired outcome, the AI can help them do that. I think in the past this would have been really difficult. If somebody had built open source software or made software available, and a person who's a non-programmer wanted to use it, install it, download it, it is fairly difficult, because you not only download the software, but then you find that it has dependencies. Like, to install this software, you need this other module, the other open source module it depends on. But now with the help of agents, you just say, okay, get it and install it. If there are any dependencies, then install them. And if you have, before you start running it, check it for security, make sure that it actually does what the author has said. So all the work that I've put out there, anyone can just ask an AI agent to make sense of it for them and customize it for them.
Yeah, of course, the answer of how do you get started is you just ask the bot to help you. As more and more of us have these executive assistants, as you called it, not making decisions for us, but like, recommending things, right? Like we get into that sort of awkward state where like the recommendations are really good and maybe 95% of the time you go with it, so you have to be especially careful. But I'm curious, like, how, as we live with these agents, whatever concerns you may have about bias or, not knowing how they're trained, or I see so much of a risk of like centralization, of like 4 companies on Earth, and everyone's relying on them to like run their lives, and to go to very extreme example or like outcome possible. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so that's a deep question. There are multiple different dimensions on which I think about this, right? So one is, a strong belief I hold is that our use of AI should make us smarter and not dumber, right? And that is key. Like every day when I use AI, I think about, is this interaction and relying on AI making me less capable as a human? If it is, then I should rethink it.
Right.
Because the goal is that I'm learning, and the just as the AI is learning from the interactions with me, from its own learning and my direct feedback, I want to be learning. So in my entire synthesis system, something I didn't describe here is this lessons learned thing. So every time I work on a project or even a task or even a subtask, the AI is instructed to save lessons learned at a very granular level, but then also at a more generalizable level that it could be, say, transferred to a different domain. So learning is important. So the first thing is we should not become dumber as we use AI, and always be thoughtful. And that is why it's important to do this. If you just give in to say simple vibe coding or agentic coding where you're just letting the whole system build it for you, well, okay, in the first few times, maybe it built a great system for you, but now you don't know how to build one yourself.
Yeah.
And you might argue that I don't need to, but then you soon won't even know what a good system is.
Right.
So the first part is that the use of AI and the collaboration with AI should make us better, better in our judgment, smarter, help us learn more knowledge, and also help improve where it makes sense to use AI and how it makes sense to use AI. That's one aspect of this. The other part also is that, when we are working with these systems, as for the bias, one reason I'm a big proponent for open source AI is that anyone can examine. So all these skills I have built, whether it's the slop detection skill or the skill to help you review your software code or to automate certain tasks on your computer, because they are open source, you can read them. You can use an AI agent, or not one, you can use 5 different AI agents to help analyze if any of my biases are present in these or any other undesirable biases are present, and then remove them. As far as the models are concerned, it is important to not rely entirely on one model, is to use a diversity of models. So I often do that in another, my personal agentic system that I've also open sourced. It uses a whole bunch of agents from different providers, and will also use the Google Gemma models running locally or DeepSeek running locally. So I think it's important. I wish there was a model that was completely open source. I don't know if there are any. There are certainly open weights models, but I think if all AI remain proprietary, yes, then that would be a problem, because not only their biases, but also their rules. Like, let's say I want to do something and the AI decides for some reason that's not okay to do, right? Even though it could be perfectly ethical and legal and normal and fine for me to do. Like, for example, let's say there's an engineer who is negotiating a job with Anthropic, and they use Claude to help them negotiate the best job for them.
Right.
Well, can they totally trust that Claude will be giving them the best advice in their favor? And now let's take it a step further. Let's say they are leaving Anthropic and
Yeah.
maybe not on such good terms. And then they go to Claude for help with negotiating against the company that
Yeah.
made Claude.
Yeah.
That would be challenging. And also, this comes to the topic of sovereign AI. If only certain countries or certain entities or companies control the models, then what if you want to do something that is not in their interests and you want to get help and advice with that? So I strongly believe that at some point there need to be top tier frontier models that are open source and open and customizable, that people can, within reason, or maybe not even maybe without any limits, be able to modify their behavior. That also, of course, comes with risks, because you don't want people to be doing unethical or illegal activities with these systems, or get that kind of help. But then who decides, right? So that's a complex issue.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was listening to something yesterday, and they mentioned a use case which is totally obvious. I just hadn't thought about it, which is, we have elections coming up, and people are going to ask their chatbots,
Yeah.
like, what does candidate so and so stand for, or how should I evaluate? And I don't know if I can trust that. I'd like to,
Yeah.
and so if it is, yeah, where the data comes from, how it's deciding how to synthesize it for me or for you, like it worries me.
You can minimize or reduce, I wouldn't say minimize, actually I'll say reduce some of those risks by doing this, that instead of just say asking an LLM that, hey, or a chatbot, what does this person stand for, or should I vote for them or not, the more information and context and a framework you can give it. So part of what I've done in these synthesis skills is, like I mentioned, the thinking framework. So what I would do is I would say, here are the things that I value, and here are the following sources, you should refer to them about where this candidates, what they stand for.
Yeah.
And here is how I want you to evaluate this. So if I gave all this information, the likelihood of the LLM's biases coming in are reduced somewhat. Not eliminated, but they are reduced, because if I say, hey, weigh this more, give this less importance, and then if I also test that with 5 different LLMs and perhaps few made
Right.
by other countries.
I mean, that feels like something a very highly informed and highly motivated, voter citizen would do. So
Yes, that
it's
is
not
absolutely.
it's not a new issue like how people figure out what to believe or who to vote for in this case. But I don't know. I'm interested in exploring this need for open source, and also I mean this is a separate but sort of related issue. Like I'm curious on the open source community. Like one of the values of publishing, maintaining open source software was that you as a human would accrue some benefit. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a financial benefit, but like you'd be recognized in
Yes.
some way. And now that agents, AI is absorbing all of that, does that model break down?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, before I come to that, I want to speak a little bit about your more about your
Yeah.
previous question. I was thinking, when it comes to open source and proprietary, it's like you have an Iron Man suit, but it's owned by Tony Stark and Stark Corporation, right? Like
Yeah.
if you go to war against the Avengers, would the suit disable itself or just get you not work anymore, right? So that's on the other
Which is a
hand, if
big deal if you're, I don't know, not the United States or China, which are the two primary makers
right.
of AI, right? If you're relying on a system, and I think these things kind of are, on a path towards getting nationalized in some way. Like that makes me uneasy if I'm, I don't know, some European state.
Yes. So I think that is something people have to address. And if it's open source, and there are, now recently I've read certain European countries are switching over to Linux because they don't want to depend on our software, like our US software from Microsoft or other such companies. They're also moving towards using their own LLMs or at least open source LLMs. So I think that's happening. So I think that challenge certainly is there, and it relates to your the next question you asked about, what is the economic benefit. I think that people do work in the public domain and open source for a whole range of motivations. Some people do this because they simply want to benefit humanity. Some people also believe if I do the right thing for humanity, it benefits me as well because I'm part of humanity. And some people may have a commercial goal with it, that hey, if I do this work, it will get me better employment or more prestige or whatever else I value in my life. And I would think that every open source developer their motivations include some proportion of these different values. The use of agents does change some things in which that didn't quite exist before. Like you could fork a piece of software and make your own version, but that then required a fair amount of work to maintain it. So let's say if WordPress is a great CMS, and somebody else forked a version of WordPress and made a different version, a different CMS that has everything that WordPress does and plus some more. But after a while, as WordPress improves, it would be hard for this divergent fork to keep
Right.
up. Now with AI, that's no longer the case. Every few weeks, every time WordPress comes up with a new release, let's say I have a
Right.
proprietary or my own competing open source software that competes with WordPress, I could keep adding my own improvements to it and have my agent check every time WordPress releases a new version to also add in those best features back into my system. So it becomes easier to take advantage of open source software. Or let's say, when Google built the Android operating system, they built it on the foundation of Linux. Many companies have built their proprietary or semi-proprietary operating systems based on Linux. But you need to have a lot of resources to do that. And once you diverge, then you lose out on all the further developments that are happening elsewhere. Now, anyone can benefit from open source without having to give back. So that becomes a little easier. Now it depends on what your motivations for creating the open source software is. That if you just want to have a more fair world and you want to give people these tools, maybe you don't care. But if you have also built a business, the kind of open source plus commercial model that many companies have had, that Red Hat popularized, where you could get the Red Hat operating system for free, but there's also Red Hat Enterprise and the services you get from it. I don't know the answer to how this will emerge. I certainly don't hope that open source would be hurt by this or would go away. I think that this would enable a lot more open source software creation, because now for things that were extremely expensive to build as open source, let's say you're building a customer relationship management system or a content management system, or let's say something really complicated that required you to read a lot of research papers, know the best science, and be able to create this amazing software product. You would have to be a big, rich, powerful company like, say, Salesforce or some organization like that could afford to build this system. And open source software makers would find it difficult to keep up because they don't have the resources, the money, and the ability to hire all these PhDs. But now with AI agents, that changes. Now, if you are committed to your mission and you care deeply and you are willing to put in that time, if you did not have the ability to read certain scientific papers that you needed to write this software yourself, you can now have the AI help you with that. If there was certain product knowledge or feature functionality thinking that you didn't have, you can work with the AI to help you achieve that. So I think it increases everybody's capability, and I would think that it would lead to more open source software and better for the world, but it's hard to say.
Rajiv, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you for having me on.
This is Future Around and Find Out, and I am so excited to keep exploring with you, to keep steering the future in the right direction. Go to futurearound.com to get the newsletter, to ask questions of upcoming guests, and to find more ways that we can build a better future together.